So by forking, we've made a copy of the repository that exists on my account on Colt, and I've made some changes locally. I push them up. We see the changes. We did this in the last video. Where is that commit? Basic? No, not basic. Here it is. Change color palette on this style directory. Anyway, I have some work, and it actually shows I am one commit ahead of the original repository that I forked from. So GitHub is actually telling me automatically, hey, you have some work on your fork that is not on the original. And I can just ignore that and never do anything with the original. Or I can actually share my work or attempt to share it by making a pull request. I can make a pull request from my fork to the original repository. So I'm not going to actually go through with it because I don't want to bother the creator of this repository with a dumb, useless pull request that they'll just close. But you can see it's the same interface. I can create a pull request with my changes. I can leave a comment. I can explain why. Why I think this should be merged in. And then the repository owner and anybody who has merge permissions can then take my pull request and merge it in or close it or whatever they want to do. So that mechanism is really, really important. This would be a way for me to make a real contribution, not the silly one that I did, but I could make a real contribution to a project that I don't own. I don't have permission to push to it, but I can fork it. I can make my own suggestions, my own changes, and then open a pull request. And that's the basis of this workflow. So this workflow, I'm calling it fork and clone. Other people say fork and clone. I'm pretty sure it's not some official term, but it's common enough. It allows a whole bunch of people to work on the same project without actually all having permission and write permissions for the same repository. So I have some diagrams that I'll be using to illustrate how this all works. If we have 3 collaborators, which is just a subset, let's say we have way more on a big project, potentially thousands of people who want to collaborate. But here on the diagram, I've only included 3 people. Me, somebody named Taylor, and somebody named Lupe. And then we have the official project repository. Maybe we're working on React or some big repository that we don't have access to directly push or change settings. We have to make a fork. So we each fork, that's what the fork is representing. And then on my local machine, I clone my fork. So that's what this is indicating. So I have my fork that I made from the original project repo. I clone that down. So now I have this automatic remote setup called Origin, just because I cloned this repository. The default remote name is going to be Origin. So Origin refers to my fork. That's done automatically when I cloned. But then I'm going to set up a second remote. And this remote is going to be anything I want, but normally we would call it upstream. That's a very conventional name. And it refers to the original repo that we forked. So this allows me to basically have a place where I can do my own work and push changes up to. But also, if there are changes made to the original repository on a large open source project like React, there might be new commits and pull requests merged daily. I want to be able to get those down on my machine. So even if I can't push up, I can still pull changes down. So often upstream or original will be the name of this remote. But now we have 2 remotes, one going to my fork and one going to the original. So now if I do some work, I make a new commit or a bunch of commits. Normally this would be on a feature branch, but for the diagram's sake, I'm just doing it on the main branch or whatever this branch is. So I make some work or I make some commits. Then if I want to try and share it with the repository creators, I definitely cannot push up because I don't have permission. So instead, I can push up to my origin, which is my fork. I can push whatever I want up there. I could make the whole thing empty. I have permission to do anything with that because I own that fork. So now on GitHub, I have my fork that I've worked on, and I can make a pull request, just like what I showed you here, where I forked 2048. I can make a PR and ask for my changes to be merged in. So then if I do that, open up a pull request, then it's up to the original or the official project repo owners, somebody who maintains it, who has permission to accept, to merge, or close my pull request. And if my pull request is accepted, it's merged in. So then the next step is basically show up at work again and pull down my changes from upstream. So there's new work that was done on upstream. I don't have it locally. So I go and get the latest from the real repository. I pull that down. And then I can do some more work locally, push that up to my fork, and then from my fork, make a pull request when necessary. So the whole point of this workflow is to allow people who don't have direct access, direct permission to push or to change anything in a project repository, they can still collaborate, they can still make pull requests by forking and then pushing their changes to their fork and opening a PR. So this would be the sort of cycle. We pull down the latest changes from the official repo, that's one remote. We make changes, we push them up to our fork, and then we can make a pull request if we want with suggestions or with our changes that we want to be merged into the original repo. And then we just wait and we hope that someone responds. So here's a short summary. Fork the project, clone the fork, add our upstream remote, do some work, push to the origin, and then open a PR to the original or the upstream. So I'm going to demo that again in the next video. We'll wrap up by just talking about why this is a good idea in some situations. This is not a workflow that you may want to use like on every single project that you're working on, but again, at a larger scale where there might be some project that thousands of people might be interested in working in, or even if it's just 2 or 3 people, but you don't want to give them access directly to your repository, people can still make these suggestions. They can make their own changes and hope that you merge them in. They can make a pull request from their forks. So this allows us to work with tons and tons of people without having to have direct collaborators added to a repo.